What's up, metal and heavy music fans? Today we are ranking the sophomore albums from classic death metal bands. Alright, and if you watched part 1, you may have noticed I've further augmented the tiers here to better reflect what I'm going for. I think a lot of people got a little upset at a D tier, and I want people to understand that I think pretty much every album in this lineup is awesome. So, not to say anything in the bottom is really like terrible. Some of it's just not my personal style, and some of it is just kind of okay, but still good in its own right. But that out of the way, let's dive right in with a real solid one. We've got Death with Leprosy, which has to go right up to perfection for me. It's almost unfair. I feel like anytime Death is in the list, they pretty much have to go to the top, right? Like, they have so many different phases, but they do so well with each of them. And here they're still in that kind of like balls to the wall, just really aggressive kind of style that they helped to originate and pioneer. And Leprosy is a great album. I'm a little bit partial to Scream Bloody Gore overall. I know some people kind of take one or the other, but come on, like, so many fantastic songs, really fun energy, great iconic album cover, gotta be up there. Next up, I'm gonna grab Obituary with Cause of Death. And so this is another one of those classic death metal albums, opening up with that big, long, spooky intro with the big sustained power chords and flavors soloing before breaking loose again. And I believe I mentioned in my last video, I'm not a huge Obituary fan. Like, they're kind of mid for me, mid to lower in comparison to some of these other groups. But I do really like some of their early stuff. And I am wondering if it's a hot take to prefer the debut the most, which I kind of do, but this one it's pretty good. It's a little less focused. The songs are a bit longer than maybe they need to me, but great tracks too, like Chopped in Half and Dying. And yeah, it's pretty solid. I'd say it's around the middle out of this grouping for me. One of the better Obituary albums, in my opinion. All right, let's grab Autopsy. This will probably be the first kind of upset for some of the viewers, because I know that was definitely something on the last one. So this is Mental Funeral. Pretty fun. I'm a big fan of the D-beat sections, because I love me some speed when it comes to death metal. Love the sound of the drums and bass too, especially on tracks like Torn from the Womb. But y'all know I'm not as into the doomy stuff, which is what subjectively drags the enjoyment down for me. For this whole band, really. But on this album in particular that we're talking about, looking at it objectively, I'd say it's a pretty solid album, and for a review, I'd probably give it like a B, maybe even a B+, but subjectively, in terms of my overall enjoyment, listening to it compared to some of the other albums on this list, it's on the lower side. Kind of group it in the not really my thing category. All right, let's go for a little redemption, though, after that, hopefully. We've got Cryptopsy with None So Vile. So, just 2 years after the debut, we get what is widely regarded as their best album, and the reasons seem pretty clear. This maintains, if not ramps up, the rabid bloodthirst of the debut, while also stepping up the songwriting and overall performances. It's just very concise, too, at just 32 minutes, which I really appreciate. I think that's a great length for a death metal album. That's just like trying to go for your throat. And once again, delivering in a number of different areas, from the brutal to the earworm, and the speed here. Speaking of speed, going from Autopsy to this is just insane, like complete opposite ends of the spectrum. Lots of great tracks here: Crown of Horns, Slit Your Guts, Phobophile, S tier, this one for sure. Alright, Bolt Thrower with Realm of Chaos, Slaves to Darkness. Some people have been mad about my take on Bolt Thrower, because they're another band I'd say are just sort of mid to lower for me. But on this album, they step up the speed and the riffs from the debut. I really dig the guitar tone, and I'd argue this has some of the best hooks of their discography. Nice mix of battering blast beats and groove, as on Through the Eye of Terror. Got some really great build-ups too, with tracks like World Eater. Strong album. I'm going to put this one also at great. Might even put it a little bit higher than Obituary. Alright, Incantation, Mortal Throne of Nazarene. So I really hate the production on this album. It's got this very like tinny, thin sound that I don't think complements their style as effectively. Once my ears readjust, the songs are pretty rad, actually, and I think the songwriting is kind of a step up in terms of dynamics from the debut. Some really nice transitions on this album too, with Essence ablaze, lulling you into that hypnotic head bob effect before pulling out the rug and beating you to death with blast beats. All said and done, I actually like the songwriting on this one just a little bit more than the debut, but again, the production just really drags it down. And once more, Incantation, just one of those bands that it's just their style is not always for me. I like the album. I think with better production it would be higher, but I'm actually gonna put it down here with Autopsy. All right, Entombed, Clandestine. So as I said in my Entombed tier list, these first two albums are really the only ones I enjoy from their discography, basically until the Entombed AD stuff. I'm not a big fan of their more kind of rock-oriented stuff. And that also said, this album is decent, but it's no Left Hand Path, in my opinion, and it easily gets beat out by a lot of the other albums on this list. Like, it's good, it's a solid listen, but it's just like, it can't compete with some of the stuff we're going to be talking about, and even these albums that are already up here, so good tier for that one. And once again, we are going for 4 albums per tier, just to really challenge me to actually kind of differentiate these. Let's go with Immolation next, with Here in After. Not really feeling this album, even though I do quite dig the band. Like, when I did my full, like, death metal bands ranked lists, like, they were pretty high up for me. I think they have a pretty solid discography. But this one, it's alright. I will say it's cool how the guitars, like, really start to develop that kind of scorched quality to them that matches the band name. Like, it really does sound like the entire studio is just being burned down around me as I listen to this album. And there's also some variety in pace and texture, like on the title track. Pretty solid, but a little messy and kind of unremarkable. Not one of their best. Not bottom, but I'd put this one also kind of in good tier. Let's go with Deicide and Legion. So the band considers this album, from their own mouth, to be their most difficult in terms of technicality, and it definitely sounds a lot more chaotic than the debut right from the beginning with Satan's Spawn. I can hear elements of this album that were likely an inspiration to mathcore bands later in this same decade, which is kind of neat. Despite the chaos, though, it's a tight album at just 8 tracks over 29 minutes. Again, I'm really appreciative, especially as a reviewer of shorter albums, but just for this style, I just think it works better. Like, if you're starting to run towards an hour, usually you're kind of stretching things out. Some bands can pull it off, not others. Dead But Dreaming is strangely hypnotic. Trifixion fucking shreds. Revocate the Agitator is pummeling, and it's just a fun title to say. Not as strong as the debut overall, I think. Probably because the vocals in particular fall a little bit short, but this is a really fun time and just a great album to listen to over and over again. I'm going to put it at fantastic. Pretty high up there. All right, another really big one for me. We've got Nile with Black Seeds of Vengeance. So basically, this takes everything that was already great about the debut and just steps it up. The atmosphere is bigger, the songwriting's more complex, the performances are absolutely jaw-dropping. You get that chanting part on Defiling the Gates of Ishtar with the gong in the background, and you really do get transported kind of to another place in time from that. So it's like, who says brutal death metal just has to be for cavemen? While other bands were kind of smearing blood and fecal matter on the walls, the Chad Nile were crafting fucking worlds and doing a fantastic job of it. So I'm putting it up at perfection tier. In fact, like, even a little bit higher than Death, like, because of the complexity in addition to the energy. Just all around incredible album, kind of in a league of its own. All right, another band some people weren't too happy about my opinion on, but we've got Suffocation with Breeding the Spawn. Another kind of like mid-tier band for me. I feel like their style is just sort of generic in comparison to some of these other ones. So, I don't know, do with that what you will. Some people disagree with me on that. This album in particular, another one that kind of has thinner production, and they were having some financial issues due to some stuff going on with Roadrunner Records at the time. Very muddy with a lot of the instrumentation, particularly the cymbals and some of the guitars kind of getting lost in the mix, really. On the plus side, the songwriting is a little bit more technical. Vocals are pretty strong, so credit for adding more dynamics and better fleshing out the songs, but still not the most enjoyable to listen to. And again, I just find these guys to be kind of basic. I'm not big on them. I'm not quite putting them in not my thing because I do enjoy this a little bit more than those, but I'm just going to put it kind of at the low end of good tier. I feel like kind of an easy one. We got 6 Feet Under with Warpath, and it's going to the bottom. Like the bottom. I just don't like 6 Feet Under. I try, like, just to humor the handful of people in the audience that do like at least these earlier albums. It's not the worst thing in the world. Like, they get a lot worse than this. Like, I will continue to say 6 Feet Under's latest album is easily one of, if not the worst album I've ever heard, at least in death metal. And this isn't that bad. It's just kind of meh. But flipping back to the other side of the scale, we got Pestilence with Consuming Impulse. So I almost hate to give these spacey boys credit, given what a donk the vocalist is, but goddamn, this album's just a blast. Like, I can't deny it. It's kind of the perfect midpoint of that raging energy of Scream Bloody Gore, with a little bit more of a technical and progressive twist. The vocals are absolutely battering, and the songs are just incredible. Like, every single song on this thing is really good. So I'm going to put it at fantastic. Honestly, it could fit on perfection. It's like just short of that because I've got at least one more album that I want to fit on here that kind of bumped it. But man, really good stuff. Definitely check it out. All right, we got Gorguts with the Erosion of Sanity. So I hate even having to include these albums, honestly, really, because Gorguts as a band is one I hold up very highly overall. But everything pre-Obscura isn't really a good representation of their best qualities. Like, you can definitely hear a little bit more death influence on this one and some of those prog influences seeping in, but they haven't really like fully formed Voltron at this point. Still, I'd say it's more enjoyable and impressive than some of the others on this list, but not all that memorable. So another one I'm going to put at good tier, but kind of at the top of that one. Another really strong one, we got Atheist with Unquestionable Presence, and this is just awe-inspiring to me in terms of the musicianship, because not only is it insanely technical, the progressive songwriting is impressive, it's also just way ahead of its time. Like, they were kind of the first to like really dig into this particular style, and so many other bands are doing it now. Like, there's hundreds of thousands of them like coming out, it seems like every day. They weren't like the first progressive death metal band, but they were the first to like bring this particular sound. I feel like that is highly influential at this point. So I'm going to put them at fantastic. Another one that could almost hit up perfection, and I'm going to put them kind of right in the middle here. Dying Fetus, Killing on Adrenaline. So I really like Dying Fetus. I hold up their discography pretty well, pretty decent. It has some slumps, and this album's, it's okay. Like, I don't hate it, but again, it's sort of like an issue where comparatively to these other albums, it really can't hold a candle. So ultimately, I'm just putting it down pretty low in the okay, not my thing category. It's, you know, it's fine. They have better records that would hold up stronger on this list, but I mean, look at these. Like, it can't compete with these top ones. Vader de Profundus, so a classic album in the Vader discography, definitely a fun mix of death and thrash riffs. Not my favorite of theirs. Some people consider this to be like their best album, or at least one of their best albums, but I think they have quite a few actually after this one that I would put at A or S tier. It's a little inconsistent for me, but I do love Blood of Kingu and Sothis in particular. Silent Empire is also a good opener. I'm going to put this one at great, pretty high on great too, because I do enjoy it. I'm a big kind of Vader fanboy. All right, another big one here, Morbid Angel with Blessed Are the Sick. So I feel like they kind of pulled sort of a South of Heaven on this album, slowing things down with Fall from Grace opening with a straight up doom metal riff. And I'm probably going to get crucified again, but there are just so many Cannibal Corpse, Deicide, Death, etc. albums I would rather be listening to than this album. Like, I like Morbid Angel a lot. I think that they're extremely important to the genre, but their early albums that get held up really high just aren't really my overall favorites. I do really like the organ and acoustic, the overall atmosphere, the interludes, but other areas can be kind of a chore on this one. So what can I say? I'm kind of a weird Domination fanboy. Like, that's, to me, like, that's their best album. I do still think that it deserves at least great tier, balancing things out, but I'd put it pretty low on that tier, honestly. And then people probably argue with me putting this higher, but we got Cannibal Corpse with Butchered at Birth, another classic. They have better albums, but as far as the early ones go, this is among the best, and definitely easily among the best things that Chris Barnes has been involved with in his career. I'm a little more partial to Tomb of the Mutilated and the Bleeding overall, but nonetheless, I can put this at fantastic tier. A little bit on the lower end of that, but good stuff. And then we're going to close things out once again with one of my all-time favorite bands, Carcass with Symphonies of Sickness. It's got to go at perfection. These guys, I've said it in multiple videos at this point, they can do it all. Like on the last tier list, I'm hoping this is also a redemption arc because I put their previous album, their debut, like at the bottom. And they just get better from here, moving into the melodic death metal stuff. Even some of the death and roll stuff is really fun with them, but really fantastic album. And I think each one of their albums has something special to offer, and I would put this one right up there at the top with the other big boys. Y'all check out this playlist for plenty more death metal videos, and this playlist for all of my metal ranking videos. Let me know down in the comments, how would you rank these albums differently? Where do we agree? Where do we disagree? But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.